This video is going to be looking at the sources talking about Gaius' relationship with the Senate, equestrians and plebs. So there's going to be two sections of Cassius Dio, a short section of Suetonius, and then a short section of the younger Seneca. So we're going to start with the sources talking about Gaius' relationship with the Senate. So it starts with right at the beginning of the reign, where Gaius had originally been denouncing Tiberius. So he'd kind of said, at the beginning of the reign, yes, Tiberius had been really horrible, he'd been a tyrant, I'm not like him, and he sort of claims at this point that he has burnt all of the documents relating to the treason trials, so any evidence that the Senate gave against each other, so on and so forth. So this is kind of like the context of what happens next. So initially he's denouncing Tiberius, and then suddenly he changes his attitude, and he enters the Senate House and makes a long speech praising him, as in Tiberius, and censored at some length the Senate and the people on the grounds they were quite wrong to criticise him. So there's a real change in policy, and he kind of has a go at the Senate of like, oh, you know, you shouldn't have been saying what you've been doing, so on and so forth. You sort of were committing acts of treason against Tiberius. And then he re-examines one by one the cases of those who had perished in the treason trials, and try to prove that basically the senators have been guilty of causing destruction of most of them. In other words, it wasn't Tiberius' fault, it was the Senate's fault. And because they're the one who gave the evidence, they're the one who laid out the charges, they're the ones who kind of wanted to condemn everybody. And this evidence he's using is supposedly drawn from the documents he said he had burnt. So either Caligula was lying, or he found new evidence. I would suggest he was lying about the burning of the documents. Once he kind of has this go at them, he then gives this not particularly exciting speech about the Senate and how they've basically been attacking Tiberius, and as a result they were awful. So he sort of says, you handled Tiberius in a devious manner. Also put Sejanus to death after puffing him up with pride and corrupting him. And he says, as a result, I ought not to expect any decent treatment from you. So he said, your past behaviour shows you can't be trusted. You're a horrible group of people. You sort of promote people who should be promoted, and then you kind of get rid of them, and you treated Tiberius really badly, and therefore I don't think you're going to treat me very well either. Maybe he has a point, I don't know. But it's a real kind of change in attitude. Because initially Caligula was quite nice to the Senate and worked really well with them, and then suddenly he's like, you're all evil and I really hate you. And this is what the rest of this speech basically goes on about, in terms of why he's changing his mind. It's not particularly relevant, to be completely honest. It doesn't really say... It's one of those speeches that says a lot without saying very much. So after giving this particular speech against the Senate, he reintroduces the charge of treason. So in other words, we have the return of the treason trials. And when we look at the tyrannical behaviour, it will talk more about those treason trials. It doesn't really go into it in this particular section. As a result of this, the Senate and the people are afraid. And because they're really afraid, they decide that they're going to have to try and take the situation in hand. So they reassemble, make speeches praising Gaius as a most sincere and pious ruler, since they were grateful for him for not having put them to death. So thank God you didn't kill us, because you're fantastic, is basically what they're doing. They pass a resolution to offer a sacrifice of oxen to his clemency every year. They vote that golden image of Gaius should be carried up to the Capitol and hymns sung in his honour. They give him permission to celebrate a triumph, even though he hadn't really defeated anybody. So they kind of go bending over the backwards to try and give Gaius really nice stuff in order for him not to kind of, kill the entire Senate. So that kind of gives you sort of a very difficult relationship that the Senate had with Gaius. Initially starts quite well, and it becomes very negative as Gaius starts to sort of target them using more treason trials, and as a result they become this kind of pretty unpleasant, grovelling group of people trying to protect themselves. Fine. So then we have a short section about the equestrians. So he does a few things quite well initially. So he publishes the accounts of public funds. It's not really anything to do with the equestrians, but it's quite a good thing. It's administrative change. So you can link that to the administrative changes section. Again, another administrative change. He uses the troops to put out fire and provides financial aid for the victims. Hurrah. And then we have some equestrian stuff. So the role of the equestrian order was becoming depleted. So that'd be families either dying out or as a result of the treason trials under Tiberius. He summons men of distinguished family and great wealth from all over the empire, even outside of Italy, and enrolls them into the order. So he basically sort of promotes people into the equestrian class to help build up the equestrian class. And he even gives some of them to wear senatorial dress, before they'd held any of the magistracies, which allowed them to enter the Senate. So he's definitely promoting the equestrians probably over any other group. He obviously wants them, as it says here, that they would enter the Senate in due course and become senators. Remember, the equestrians are really important to the emperors. They're really vital for tax collection. They're really important for trade. They're really important for administration. That's why you tend to see most of the emperors treating the equestrians really, really positively, because they're really good at their job. They'd got this reputation during the Republic of being really good administrators, so the emperors use them for the same particular role, and they do tend to promote them over other groups as a result. So this is kind of following that kind of pattern of behaviour that the previous emperors had done. So these measures cause general satisfaction, so everyone's pretty happy about it. But then we have another administrative change. So he puts the elections once more into the hands of the people and the plebs. The elections had been controlled by the Senate. Now he's putting them back into the ordinary people. And he sort of abolishes a tax, which we've already talked about, and he was throwing out tickets. There's a bit more largesse about that. But it's as a result of these election changes, he distresses sensible people, i.e. the Senate. He reflected that if the magistracies should once fall into the hands of the common people, public money would be exhausted, people would run out of money, and many disasters would occur. Because clearly you can't have poorer people, normal, in inverted commas, common people, actually helping to run their country, because that would be shocking. I hope that came across as sarcastic as I meant it to. But anyway, yeah. There's an element of snobbishness in these sources, as you can probably tell, which I don't particularly like. So then we have his relationship with the plebs. So you could, I should point out, use this section about his relations with the plebs as well, because he's obviously allowing the plebs to be elected and hopefully promoted into the Senate in the long run. In terms of specific policies towards the plebs as well, he holds several gladiatorial contests, and it tells you where he'd held them. He stages a great number of theatrical shows. I can't say that word. Shows of various kinds in improvement buildings, some at night. That's lovely. He scatters vouchers amongst the audience, ties into all sorts of gifts. So that'd be like food, money, whatever. He sort of does banquets and is rewarding senators with praetorships. You can link that into the relationship with the Senate, even though it wasn't his turn. You have all-day games celebrated in the circus. That'd be the Circus Maximus. And there's races and panther baiting. And there's races with chariots, which is all mentioned in here, which is all very lovely. And then he does this kind of really weird thing about building a massive bridge. So it's a bridge from, Baiae to Puteoli. Sorry, just reading it again. So 3.5 Roman miles. I don't know what Roman miles are in like modern day miles, sorry, but it's big. So he had earth heaped on the planks and made a kind of Appian way in which he trotted back and forth for 2 consecutive days. So on the first day he wore an oak leaf crown with some swords and stuff. On the second day he went as a charioteer with some really famous people who were really good charioteers and a Praetorian Guard. So he builds this bridge because he builds a bridge. Remember we talked about Gaius and his building works. He likes to do stuff just because he can, not because it actually helps particularly anybody. He says it's to build a bridge as improvement on Xerxes' famous feat of bridging the much narrower Hellespont. Remember we did that during the Persian War. Others suggest it's because there was like some weird prophecy that he couldn't become an emperor because it's something to do about, what does it say? He's no more chance of becoming emperor than of riding a horse dry shod across the Gulf of Baiae. So he does it just to disprove kind of like this criticism of him. It's not really linked to the plebs, to be honest. I don't know where it goes. It's a bit of a weird section, but it's quite good to showing kind of like what Gaius is like. Anyway, then we have Gaius gave several shows abroad. So he gets ones in Athens, in Sicily, and in Gaul, which is nice, about oratory. Okay. The younger Seneca section it's very critical of Gaius. He says, your whole existence is tied up with the belly of the human animal. So he's kind of suggesting that he was using like the food and bread and stuff to keep control of the people, because if he kept them hungry and then gave out food, they would really like him. Basically, which is what this is talking about. So a starving population is intolerant to reason, cannot be mollified by justice. So because they're really hungry, you can kind of do what you want because they can't think straight. And at the end, when he died, the Roman people were alive with 7 or 8 days food supplies yet remaining. So actually, at the end of Gaius's reign, essentially they were on the brink of starvation. There was no food. So this quote will be really useful later when we talk about Claudius, who's the emperor that comes next, and how he kind of solves this particular problem. But what we do have is this idea that obviously Gaius is using the food supply to ensure his own popularity by keeping people a little bit hungry than giving out the food, which is basically what younger Seneca is making the point about. And that is it for these sources. For once, these relations with other groups is nice and short.